The royal ship of the Surreal people glided across the silent stars. Its silver hull caught the glow of nearby suns, and its banners shimmered with the crest of the Surreal crown. Inside, Princess Illyra moved through the corridors surrounded by guards, servants, and advisors. She was on her way to a distant colony, a journey meant to show her presence among her people. It was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be calm. Yet danger was never far in the galaxy. Thomas, a human soldier assigned to the exchange guard program, marched at the rear of her escort. He wore standard armor, heavier than the thin suits the Surreal guards carried. To the Surreal he looked strange, broad and rough compared to their slim, graceful frames. But the Queen had agreed to include humans in the guard, curious about their reputation for endurance and bravery. Thomas kept his eyes sharp, his mind alert, as the princess moved with elegance through the shining halls of the ship. Then the alarms rang. Red lights flashed across the corridor and the ship shook under sudden fire. Explosions tore against the hull as raiders, ships painted black and red, swarmed from the shadows of an asteroid field. The Surreal guards rushed to shield the princess, their voices sharp with orders. The ship shuddered again, and a hole split in the side of a nearby wall. Air hissed into the void until the emergency seals closed it off. "Ambush!" shouted one of the Surreal guards. "They are boarding." The raiders struck with ruthless speed. Metal claws tore into the hull and boarding tubes locked into place. The Surreal soldiers met them in the halls, blades of light clashing with plasma rifles. The corridor became a storm of smoke, shouts, and fire. The princess was pushed back, her guards forming a circle around her. But the raiders pressed forward with brutal force, breaking through the Surreal's elegant but fragile lines. Thomas stepped forward without hesitation. His training screamed at him, "Protect the royal, protect the mission." His body moved before thought could catch up. A blast of plasma shot toward the princess, and without a second thought, Thomas threw himself in front of it. His armor absorbed part of the energy, but the heat seared through to his skin. Pain ripped through his body, but he did not fall. He raised his weapon and returned fire, driving back the raiders for a moment. The Surreal guard stared, stunned by his action. They were taught to fight with skill and precision, but not to throw themselves into certain harm. Thomas did not stop. Another blast came, and again he placed himself between the princess and the fire. His armor cracked, sparks flying as systems failed. His breath came heavy, his vision blurred, yet he held his ground. "Move her back," he ordered in a firm voice. The guards, shaken but obedient, pulled the princess toward safety. Illyra's eyes locked on him, wide with shock. She had never seen anyone fight like that, not even among her most loyal soldiers. She wanted to speak, to tell him to stop, but the words froze on her lips as another wave of raiders charged in. Thomas fought like a wall of iron. Each blow that should have ended him, he absorbed. Each wound only drove him to stand firmer. The raiders tried to push past him, but his body became the shield they could not break. His weapon burned through their lines, but even when it overheated, he struck with fists and steel, refusing to step aside. The princess and her guards moved further down the corridor, but Thomas stayed where the danger was greatest. Minutes felt like hours until the ship's reinforcements arrived. Surreal strike teams surged from the other end of the hall, cutting through the raiders with swift precision. The attackers, now trapped and outnumbered, retreated back to their ships. The claws released the hull and the black vessels vanished into the dark void. Silence fell. Smoke drifted through the corridor and the glow of ruined lights flickered overhead. Thomas staggered, his armor broken, blood running beneath the cracks. He fell to one knee, breathing hard, but his eyes still searched for danger. The princess rushed forward, her guards trying to hold her back, but she pushed past them and knelt beside him. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice trembling. She could not understand how a man could take such wounds and still live, still stand, still fight. She looked at him with awe, not pity. Thomas gave a weak smile. "That was my duty." A soldier protects. The Surreal guards gathered, their expressions filled with disbelief. They had never seen such raw endurance. Never seen someone throw his very body into harm without hesitation. Among their kind, survival and skill were prized. Among humans, it seemed, sacrifice carried greater weight. To them, it was both noble and terrifying. The medics arrived and lifted Thomas onto a stretcher. His armor clattered as they carried him, each piece scarred and blackened. The princess followed close, refusing to let him be taken from her sight. She had seen many warriors in her life, but none like him. His body had been broken, yet his spirit had not bent. As the royal ship limped away from the battlefield, The Sorel whispered about the human. To them, he was not just a guard anymore. He was something rare, something to be remembered. They spoke of him as if he was a legend already, the soldier who became a wall of flesh and steel to save their princess. And though Thomas drifted in and out of pain, one thought stayed clear in his mind. He had done what he must. He had kept her alive. That was enough for him. The halls of the palace stood tall and gleaming, their walls lined with banners of the surreal crown. Sunlight poured through the wide crystal windows, casting shifting colors across the marble floors. The city beyond stretched out like a sea of towers, but the heart of it all was here, inside the Queen's court. Thomas had never seen such grandeur. He had grown up on a world of steel bases and quiet barracks, not halls where every stone seemed polished to perfection. Yet none of that mattered to him now. He lay on a bed inside the healing chambers, his body wrapped in bandages, his armor torn and stored away as nothing more than broken metal. Princess Alira sat by his side. She had come to see him every day since the attack. Her eyes carried gratitude but also questions. She had seen him take the blasts with his own body, stand tall where no one else could. It was an image burned into her memory. Thomas said little. He endured the pain as if it was part of him, his voice steady whenever he did speak. To him it was only duty. To her it was more than that. Word of what happened spread quickly through the palace and beyond. The nobles whispered of the human soldier who had thrown himself into fire for the princess. The soldiers of the guard murmured with disbelief, asking each other how a being of flesh could endure such wounds and still stand. The scholars gathered notes, eager to study what made this man so different. In every corner of the palace, the name Thomas was spoken as though it carried new weight. At last, when Thomas could stand again, the queen called for him. He walked into the throne room with slow, heavy steps, his body still healing but his posture firm. The hall was vast, lined with rows of nobles, soldiers, and advisors. At the far end, the queen sat upon her throne, her robes flowing like a river of silver and blue. She was tall, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. The princess stood near her, watching Thomas with quiet pride. The queen rose from her seat. Her voice carried across the chamber. "Human soldier, you have given your body to shield my daughter. You faced death without hesitation, and by your sacrifice the crown remains unbroken. For this the Sorel owe you more than words." Thomas bowed his head. "Your Majesty, I did only what I was trained to do." "I am a soldier. My duty is protection." The queen studied him for a long moment. "And yet you did more than duty. My own guards, skilled though they are, would not have stood as you did. You gave what others would not give. For this reason, I will not allow you to leave. You will remain under my protection here in the palace." The chamber stirred with murmurs. Some nobles nodded with approval. Others frowned, uneasy with the idea of keeping a human so close to the throne. Thomas himself felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had not expected this. He had thought once he healed, he would return to his post or perhaps be sent back to his people. Now the queen spoke as though his future was already chosen. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I came as part of the exchange guard. My place is with my unit. I am not meant to stand apart." The queen's gaze hardened. "You are more than a guard now. You are a symbol, a shield forged in flesh and will. My people must see that such strength exists. My daughter is alive because of you, and I will not see that shield sent away." Her words echoed through the hall. Thomas felt the weight of them pressing against him. He had never thought of himself as a symbol. He was only a man, trained to follow orders to protect. Yet now he was something more in their eyes, something he had not chosen. He wanted to speak again, to argue, but the sight of the princess stopped him. She stood with her hands folded, her gaze fixed on him, filled with hope. For her, perhaps this decree was not a prison, but a promise. The queen turned to the nobles. "Let it be known that from this day forward, the human soldier Thomas will remain under royal care. He shall live within these walls, protected and honored, for he carries a spirit we must understand." The nobles bowed, though not all with joy. Some whispered their doubts even as they lowered their heads. But none dared to challenge the queen's decree. After the court was dismissed, Thomas walked the palace gardens, his mind heavy. The air was filled with the scent of flowers he did not know, the colors brighter than anything on earth. Yet he felt no peace. His duty had been clear before. Now it was clouded. He was not free to choose, not free to return. He was held not by chains but by the will of a queen. Princess Alira found him there. She approached softly, her voice gentle. Do you resent her words? Thomas looked at her, then away toward the towers beyond the garden. I am a soldier. I serve where I am needed. But I was not trained to be a symbol. I was trained to fight, to guard. I do not know what it means to live under protection, when I was meant to give protection. Alira's eyes softened. Perhaps that is why you are different. You do not see what others see. To my people, you are proof that courage is not measured only in victory, but in the willingness to endure. You do not need to seek meaning. You already gave it to us. Her words settled into him. He did not answer at once, but he listened. For the first time, he wondered if his sacrifice meant more than he had thought. Perhaps his pain had given the surreal a new view of what humanity was. Perhaps his presence here could change something greater than himself. Night fell over the palace, the stars bright above the city. Thomas stood at the balcony watching the endless sky. He knew the queen had bound his fate with her words. He was not free. Yet deep within he felt a spark of something he could not name. It was not anger nor sorrow. It was something closer to purpose, though not the kind he had once known. He had stepped in front of fire for a princess. Now he was caught in a new fire, one that burned without flame. The fire of being seen not as a soldier but as a legend. Life in the surreal palace was unlike anything Thomas had known. Days stretched into long hours filled with ceremony, study, and watchful eyes. No longer a common soldier, he was placed in chambers close to the royal wing. Servants greeted him, nobles glanced at him with curiosity, and scholars asked endless questions about his body, his training, and the nature of humans. Everywhere he went, whispers followed. To many, he was no longer Thomas the guard. He was Thomas the shield, the man who gave his body for their princess. At first, Thomas felt out of place. He was used to barracks where men and women trained hard, ate quickly, and spoke little. Here the air smelled of flowers, the halls rang with music, and the food was rich beyond measure. He ate at tables where golden dishes were set before him, though he longed for the plain meals of his past. Yet he bore it without complaint, for he was still a soldier at heart. What troubled him most was not the palace life, but the eyes upon him, always measuring, always expecting. Princess Alira visited often. She would walk with him through the gardens, her voice bright as she asked about Earth, about human ways. Thomas answered in simple words, telling her of open fields, crowded cities, and the strength of those who worked with their hands. To him it was nothing special, but to her it was wondrous. She listened as though each word carried hidden treasure. In return, she told him of the surreal past, of kings and queens, of battles fought with honor but often with pride. Through their talks, Thomas felt a bond forming, not of duty but of trust. The soldiers of the guard treated him differently now. Some respected him, bowing their heads as he passed. Others eyed him with coldness, their pride stung by the idea that a foreigner had done what they had not. When they trained in the yards, many came to test him. They sparred with fast movements, their blades quick and elegant. Thomas fought with steady strikes, his body heavy but unyielding. Again and again he held his ground until they tired. His style was not graceful, but it was enduring. Slowly, even those who doubted him began to respect the strength that never faltered. Scholars pressed him with questions. They studied his scars, his armor, even the way he breathed. They asked how humans could fight through pain, how they could stand when their bodies should have fallen. Thomas had no answers. To him it was simple. A soldier did not fall until the task was done. Yet the surreal treated this as something profound. They wrote his words down, speaking of human will as though it was a weapon greater than steel. One evening, the queen called him to her private hall. She stood by the great window, the city lights glowing beyond. "You see how my people look at you," she said. "You are more than one man now. You are an idea. They see in you a strength they do not understand." Thomas bowed his head. "I do not seek to be an idea. I seek only to serve." The queen's eyes narrowed, though not with anger.
"And that is why they admire you."
"You do not crave honor, yet honor clings to you. My daughter trusts you. My people speak your name. Whether you accept it or not, you have become part of our crown." Her words left him silent. He did not know if he should feel pride or burden. He had not chosen this path, yet it had chosen him. As he left the hall, he looked to the stars beyond the balcony and wondered if this was his fate, written when he chose to step in front of fire. The days passed, and Thomas became more at ease within the palace. He trained with the guards, advised the captains, and spoke to the princess. At feasts, nobles would approach him, testing his mind with riddles or asking about his people. Some mocked gently, saying humans were strange for their bluntness. Others praised his endurance. Through it all, Thomas stayed the same, steady, honest, and unshaken. He was not made for games of court, but his plain nature won respect even there. Yet beneath the surface, shadows stirred. Not all welcomed him. Among the nobles were those who feared his influence, who whispered that the queen trusted him too much, that the princess smiled too brightly in his presence. They saw him as a danger, not because of what he had done, but because of what he might inspire. A human standing so close to the throne unsettled them. Whispers spread in the dark corners of the palace, and eyes that watched Thomas no longer carried only curiosity, but also envy and fear. Still, Thomas walked his path with the same firm step. He did not know of the plots forming nor the plans whispered against him. To him, each day was simple: train, speak, protect. When the princess asked him if he was content, he gave a plain answer. I am where I must be. That is enough. But even as he said it, he felt a shift within. For the first time since he had come to this world, he wondered if he was more than a soldier. Perhaps he was a bridge, a link between two peoples. Perhaps the choice he made in fire had opened a door that could never again be closed. The palace lights burned through the night, shining against the dark sky. Thomas stood upon the wall, his eyes scanning the horizon. Somewhere in the shadows, danger waited. He did not fear it. He had faced fire before, and he would face it again. For though he was a man of flesh, he carried within him something that steel could not match: the will to endure for the sake of others. Night fell heavy over the surreal palace, but peace did not follow. Though the city glowed with thousands of lights, shadows gathered in the hearts of those who envied Thomas. For weeks, whispers had grown among nobles and captains who did not like a human standing so close to the throne. Some said the queen trusted him more than her own lords. Others said the princess's constant visits to him made her seem weak. Out of such whispers, a hidden faction was born, one that dreamed of removing the queen and reshaping power. And to them, Thomas was both threat and target. Thomas himself did not know of these talks. He kept his days simple, filled with training, walks through the gardens, and long talks with Princess Alira. He told her of Earth's simple traditions, of farmers rising with the sun, of workers who built cities with bare hands. She listened with wonder, always asking more, her laughter soft whenever his blunt words surprised her. To her, he was not only the man who had saved her, but also a window into a different kind of strength. Yet outside the walls of their talks, tension thickened. Some guards began avoiding Thomas, their salutes stiff and cold. Nobles grew sharper in their words, testing him with hidden insults. He bore it all in silence, never answering with anger. But he noticed. He saw the eyes that once held curiosity now carry suspicion. One evening, as he walked the palace walls, the air too still for comfort, he felt danger. His soldier's sense told him something was wrong. Moments later, a group of cloaked figures slipped from the shadows, blades flashing in the moonlight. They struck not at him but at the patrol nearby, cutting down 2 guards before alarms could sound. Their goal was clear: they were moving toward the queen's private chambers. Without thinking, Thomas charged. His body was still healing, but his will was iron. He slammed into the nearest assassin, driving him against the wall. Another swung a blade toward him, but Thomas caught the arm, twisting until bone cracked. The fight turned into chaos as alarms finally rang through the halls. Guards rushed to answer, but the assassins fought with speed and skill, each step bringing them closer to the queen. Thomas placed himself in their path. Plasma bolts seared past him, blades cut at his arms, but he refused to fall back. His voice roared through the hall. "Stay behind me. Protect the queen." The surreal guards, shaken but inspired, regrouped behind his wall of flesh and steel. Together they formed a line, but it was Thomas who took the brunt, his body once again the shield. Princess Alira rushed into the corridor, her face pale. She had ignored the calls to remain hidden. She saw Thomas standing firm, wounds opening across his arms, yet his eyes burned with steady fire. She cried out, "You cannot hold them alone." He answered through gritted teeth, "Then stand with me, but do not yield ground." His words carried not only to her but to every guard in earshot. They drew strength from his voice, from the sight of him fighting long after his body should have failed. The assassins grew desperate, realizing their strike was breaking. They pressed with furious speed, but Thomas did not falter. One blade pierced his side, yet he pushed forward, driving its wielder back with raw force. Another assassin aimed a rifle at the queen, but Thomas threw himself into the shot, his shoulder armor cracking under the blast. He did not fall. He advanced. By the time reinforcements arrived, the battle was decided. The last of the assassins fled into the shadows, leaving behind the bodies of their fallen. The halls were torn with scorch marks, the air thick with smoke. The queen stood unharmed, the princess trembling but safe. And in the center of it all, Thomas stood breathing heavy, his armor broken once more, his body cut and burned. Yet he remained on his feet, unyielding. The queen approached him, her eyes sharp but also filled with a rare softness. Again, you have placed your life where others would not. Again, you have proven that your kind carries a strength my people cannot yet name. Her voice carried so that all nearby could hear. Let it be known that this man is no longer only a guard. He is the shield of the crown. The guards and nobles bowed their heads, even those who had doubted him. They had seen him stand against death itself not once but twice. None could deny his worth now. The whispers of envy would not vanish, but they would no longer outweigh the truth. Thomas had become more than a soldier. He was a symbol of defiance against fear, a living reminder that courage could be greater than steel. Later that night, when the halls grew quiet, Thomas stood alone on the balcony. His wounds throbbed, but his spirit felt steady. He knew now that his presence had drawn danger, yet it had also given strength. He thought of Earth, of the simple words of duty drilled into him since youth. Protect, endure, stand. Here, among the surreal, those same words had become something greater. Princess Alira stepped onto the balcony, her eyes still wide from the battle. She whispered, "You saved us all again. Why do you keep standing when any other would fall?" Thomas looked at her, his face calm though marked by blood and ash. "Because that is what humans do. We endure, we protect. Even when the body breaks, the will stands." Her eyes shone as she heard his words. In that moment, she understood why her mother would never let him leave. He was not just a man. He was a legend born before her eyes, and deep within Thomas, though he did not speak it, he felt the truth as well. He was no longer just a soldier. He was the bridge of flesh and will that tied two peoples together, and he knew the battle for peace was not over. It was only beginning. The palace woke to uneasy calm. The failed attack had left scars on the walls and minds alike. Guards doubled their patrols. Nobles spoke in hushed voices, and rumors of rebellion stirred like restless winds. Yet in the midst of this tension, one truth echoed through every hall. The human soldier had stood unbroken. Thomas had become more than protector. He was now the shield of the crown, a name whispered with both reverence and fear. For Thomas, the days that followed were heavy. His body bore fresh wounds, yet his spirit carried more weight than pain. Each time he walked through the palace, he saw how people looked at him. Soldiers saluted with sharper pride, servants bowed lower, and nobles measured him with cautious respect. He had not asked for honor, but it clung to him like armor he could not remove. Princess Alira visited him often, her steps light, yet her eyes troubled. She knew what the court whispered, that his presence had changed the balance of power, that his closeness to her gave him influence he did not seek. She saw his discomfort, but she also saw the quiet strength that never left him. In her heart, she believed his will was the very thing her people needed most. One morning, the queen summoned Thomas and her council into the throne room. The hall was filled with lords, captains, and scholars. The queen rose from her throne, her voice carrying across the chamber. "My people," she declared, "twice has this man given his body for the safety of my blood and crown. Twice has he stood where others faltered. He is no longer guest nor servant. He is a guardian chosen not by oath but by his own will. Today I offer him choice. He may remain as shield to my daughter, bound forever to our crown, or he may return to his world with honor that no Surreal will forget." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to Thomas. The choice weighed heavily upon him. To return meant freedom, to see his people again, to walk his own path. To stay meant chains, but also purpose. Chains not of iron, but of duty and trust. Thomas spoke slowly, each word clear. "I came here as soldier. My duty was simple, protect and endure. But in your halls I learned that duty can grow into something greater. If I return as man who stood for one. If I remain, I stand for many. I choose to stay, Not because I am commanded, but because I see trust in your daughter's eyes and hope in your people. If a shield is what you name me, then let me be that shield." A murmur spread through the hall, voices mixed with awe and relief. The queen's gaze softened, though her posture stayed regal. "Then so it shall be. From this day forward, Thomas of Earth is the shield of the crown, protector of my daughter, defender of the surreal people. His name will be written in our annals, not as foreigner, but as legend." The nobles bowed, some with pride, some with reluctance, but none dared defy the decree. The princess's eyes glimmered as she met Thomas's gaze. For her, his choice was more than duty. It was proof of a bond forged through fire and sacrifice. In the weeks that followed, Thomas embraced his new role. He trained the palace guard with human methods, teaching them not only skill but endurance. "A fight is not only won by speed," he told them, "but by the will to stand when all strength is gone." The guards listened, and soon their drills grew harder, their bodies stronger, their spirits sharper. The people of the city began to speak of him with pride. Merchants told stories of the human who fought through fire. Children played games where one would pretend to be Thomas, standing tall against invisible foes. His name traveled far beyond the palace walls, across colonies and distant ships. Humanity, once seen as untested allies, was now remembered as kin of a man who endured beyond reason. Yet Thomas himself stayed humble. He still walked the gardens at dusk, still ate simple meals, still spoke little of his own pain. To him, honor was not crown or title. It was the quiet knowledge that he had given all he could and still stood ready to give more. One night, as he stood watch upon the high balcony, Princess Alira joined him. The stars stretched endless across the sky. She looked at him with calm wonder. "Do you regret your choice?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No, a soldier without purpose is lost. Here I have purpose. I stand not for one world, but for two. If I endure, it is not only for you or your people, but for mine as well. Every step I take here tells the stars that humans do not break." Her eyes shone as she whispered, "Then you are more than shield. You are bridge." He did not answer, but he felt the truth of her words. Perhaps his fate was never to return to his own people. Perhaps his path was to stand here between worlds until his last breath. If that was so, then he would bear it without complaint. The palace bells rang softly in the distance, calling the city into rest. Thomas stood tall, watching the stars. He was only a man of flesh, yet in the eyes of those around him, he had become unyielding stone. And though danger still lingered in shadows, he knew he would face it as he always had, not with promises, not with pride, but with the simple, stubborn will that made him human. Thus the tale of Thomas. The shield of the crown began to spread across the galaxy. It was said that where Surreal and human met, there stood a man who proved that true strength was not found in steel or fire, but in the heart that chose to protect, even when the body faltered. And in that truth, humanity found its first legend among the stars.